On the heels of Saturday's deadly earthquake, Haiti is bracing for a storm that could bring heavy rains and wind and hinder rescue efforts. The death toll from that 7.2 earthquake has climbed to nearly 1,300 people and left thousands of others injured. Homes and businesses were toppled in a region that was already reeling from a combination of recent incidents like the assassination of its president, gang violence, and a pandemic and economic strife. Joining us now to talk more about this is Edvige Jean-Francois. Thank you so much for joining us as an award-winning Haitian American journalist who recently was in Haiti. You were on the front line. You know what they're going through there. So what's the latest on the search and rescue mission?
Thank you so much for having me. So this morning I've spent time talking to doctors in the region. One of the groups that I talked to, they're a group of Haitian doctors who have studied in Cuba, and they've mobilized. There's about 800 of them in this organization. They've mobilized to essentially get aid to the region. The difficulty, obviously, of getting to the region, of helping people on the ground. As you mentioned, it's more than 1,300, up to 1,500, I was told, that have been killed in the wake of the quake. And it's tragic. It's heartbreaking. One of the biggest things that they're in need of right now are medical supplies, not just medicines, but equipment for x-rays, to help with surgery. And so that's been a challenge for them at this time. And I got to tell you, from experience, having covered the 2010 earthquake, which of course was a lot more devastating, more than 200,000 people died. It's still very, very difficult for people on the ground this morning.
Yeah, they're still recovering from that, and that happened 11 years ago. Once again, it killed hundreds of thousands of people there. But this country, very resilient, but they've gone through so much. Like I said, still the devastation from the earthquake in 2010, the COVID concerns, gang violence, and then just 6 weeks ago, we're talking about the President Moise was assassinated. So how do people think the new leadership is handling this crisis? And right now, that's kind of unstable as well.
Absolutely. Well, I was in Haiti for about 3 weeks and I've just returned, and I spent quite a bit of time talking to people about where things are. And the biggest thing that I found people are going through is this sense of fear, psychological trauma, which is one of the things people don't really talk about. Even in the wake of this quake, one of the doctors said that along with medicines, medical equipment, they actually want to bring psychologists to help people cope. And so, in the wake of the president's assassination, the trauma people are facing, multiple trauma, I think it's the fear that if mercenaries can break into the president's home and kill him in his very home. So there's a sense from people living day to day, if it can happen to the president, it can also happen to me. So I think it's the thing that I find that people are really grappling with, and also a sense of insecurity, political instability. Haiti does not have a president currently. Yes, there is a prime minister, but the political vacuum is making things even more challenging. There's also the issue of gang violence. For example, there's a main road leading to the south where people need to go and bring medical equipment and supplies for the earthquake. And part of it is some have made an appeal to the gangs to let people go through. And I talked to someone who says that they are able to go through to head south to the region, but it's sort of like you take a chance, right? The gangs have said that they will let people through for humanitarian aid. And I was told that going through directly to the road, being able to pass through will take 4 to 5 hours to get to the southern region where the quake has hit. But if you don't take your chance, you decide you don't want to risk it, it can take upwards of 7 hours to get there. So multiple crises, as you've mentioned. But I do have to say Haitians are resilient. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at the things that Haiti has gone through, the quake in 2010, as you mentioned, the presidential assassination, this new earthquake, threat of Hurricane Matthew devastated Haiti in 2016, and there's threat of a tropical storm. So I think it's the sense of Haitians need a break, and they also need support. They also need understanding. I think
Yeah.
Haitians are really resilient, and I think at this time in particular, like I've mentioned, these are Haitian doctors who are taking matters into their own hands and really trying to do all they can to help at this time. But
Well,
I think I want people to understand also, beyond the physical needs of water, food, supply, it's also psychological, mental support
Yeah,
for people to get through these challenging times.
Well, you mentioned
good
support
point.
a few times there, and I know that the Haitian American writer Roxanne Gay, she had mentioned that people should not give their money to the American Red Cross because of some investigations going on with previous money not making it to the Haitian people. So are there other places or ways you think people that are listening to this can help give back and support?
I think one of the things, I mean, without necessarily endorsing a particular organizations, I think one of the key ways is to go hyper local. So if you have trusted Haitian American friends or trusted organizations that you know that the funds, the aid will go directly to those organizations, I would suggest going that route. I mean, I think at the end of the day, direct giving, direct support, trusted sources, ask people that you know and trust to give aid. But I do know, I mean, it's some of the reporting was done around the time of the 2010 earthquake, where the millions of dollars that were donated to some larger organizations did not necessarily translate to the level of aid that people would have expected. So I would say do your homework, talk to people. If you know Haitian Americans, if you know organizations, I would suggest going that route. Hyperlocal is always one of the ways to go where you can make sure that the help that you give reaches the people that it needs to reach.
And you all need a little help over there. Before we let you go, Edvige, look, you know, you're a journalist, but you're also a Haitian American. And like you mentioned, the resiliency of that country and everything that you guys have gone through, you've been very strong. We see a lot of Haitian Americans over here, and their thoughts and their prayers, obviously, with their family members and their friends over in that country. But what more can we do over here to support you? And how are you feeling personally? Let's take off the journalist hat for a second and talk about your feelings about your country and your people and everything that you guys have experienced.
Well, I got to tell you, thank you for asking that question. It's as a journalist, we know that you always try to separate the personal from the work. But in this instance, when it comes to Haiti, oftentimes my reporting has come close to home. I remember the 2010 earthquake. I was there for about a month, and my father's buried there. And one of the stories I covered was how the quake had completely unearthed graves. So there were coffins that actually had come out and mausoleums that had collapsed. So I remember when I finally got to go visit my father's grave, I was expecting, for it to be like what I'd seen, like bones scattered everywhere. And I remember the sense of relief and just crying that it was intact, but also feeling guilty that you're sort of mourning the dead when the living are in peril. So for me, it is personal. When I was there, I have to tell you that there really was a sense that Haiti had taken a turn that was heartbreaking for me, and I think in particular because of the gang violence. But I have to say also, Haitians are incredibly, incredibly resilient, and also
Mm-hmm.
self-starters, and also earnest, and want what everybody else wants, work, safety, and security. And I think at this point, the biggest challenge is the insecurity, the gangs, the
Mm-hmm.
sense of, if
Mm-hmm.
the president, as mentioned, can be assassinated in his very home, what can happen to people are asking themselves. And at the end of the day, I do think the support that we need, first and foremost, is care, understanding, compassion, not to demonize
Mm-hmm.
Haitian for what's happened, whether it's natural disaster or bad actors in the government. because you know, even in the case of the assassination, I talked to one historian who said, "Listen, presidents have been assassinated in other countries. It's not the first time. I think it's the nature of it that it was so personal and so direct that shocked everybody." So thank you for asking the question. And I do believe that Haitians will pull together. We'll get through this, and I don't want people to have a sense of fatigue, because I do think that you know, we are eternal optimists, and I continue to believe that.
Well, no matter how resilient and strong you are, we are thinking about you, and we are showing that compassion for you and all the Haitians around the world. Edvige Jean-Francois, award-winning journalist, thank you so much for starting your day. I wish we were talking to you under different circumstances, but definitely our prayers will continue for the country of Haiti. Thank you so much.